After slaying the Chimera, Bellerophon, consumed by his own hubris, rode his horse Pegasus to Mount Olympus, determined to find his own place among the gods. Zeus, angered by this, sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus, which would send Bellerophon tumbling down to earth, landing in a thorn bush. Crippled and blinded, he was forced to spend the rest of his life wandering the Lycian plains, consuming his own soul. Today will be no different. A story of a man consumed by his own hubris, a DIY spirit, and a tendency to go completely over budget. The tale of a man called Grover and his house. But who exactly is this Grover fellow? Wait, no, that's not right. Okay, that's much better. He's an electrical engineer by trade, and at the time was working for the United States Navy as a civilian contractor. So proud of his role, Grover is, that he would often claim to be a lieutenant colonel. And using this claimed position, he would make many interesting military predictions, as any armchair general or lieutenant colonel would. Such as the 2003 invasion of Iraq would only have 500 civilian casualties, something Grover was off by about 6,900. When pressed on why he would claim to be a lieutenant colonel, despite not being in the armed forces, Grover, with his flawless intellect, would argue that since his pay grade was around a lieutenant colonel's, he gets to call himself one. Grover's role as a moderator could also be described as a zero tolerance for trolling, bullying, haters, and harassment. He would say, "Fuck you" to the trolls. A very noble goal, but this was only really the case if it was directed at him. A campaign would be launched titled, "Get Out Grover!" where the posters argued that Grover's tendency is to target those who criticized him, targeting goons and platoon members outside of the form, which was out of his jurisdiction, and all around ruling with an iron fist. It seems this man is someone who has too much power, but also too little of an ability to take criticism. What could go wrong? It is 2006, and Grover, his wife, and the Groverlings currently live in a small, quaint ranch home in southeastern Virginia. But Grover's Groverlings are outgrowing Grover's great home, and thanks to a recent developer buying a bunch of land, the neighborhood will soon be connected to the city's water grid. Expansion is finally possible! Not wanting to let this newfound gift go to waste, Grover makes a post on the Hobbies, Crafts, and Houses forum to start his house blog for the wider world to see the glory of his new addition. On his first post, he would state, "My wife and I are building a $80,000, 2,000 square foot addition to our house, and we're doing it completely by ourselves. Framing, sheathing, roofing, doors, windows, flooring, plumbing, electrical, kitchen, stairs, tile, trim, everything but concrete and siding. Our existing house is currently 16,000 square feet, but the kitchen sucks and we have no garage and absolutely no storage space. The new addition adds a new kitchen, a 2-car garage, a workshop area, 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a living room. The current Grover house is simply too small for Grover and his wife." So back in December of 2005, Grover started renovating. So by the time of his first post, everything's been going on for a while. But anyone who has ever done any kind of home improvement job, from putting in a new light bulb to residing a wall, will notice a few warning signs immediately. For starters, working on a home is just a massive pain in the ass. To build this massive, brand new home extension from the ground up, using your own plans, mostly with just you and your wife, with only a smidgen of knowledge of what goes into making a home habitable, is bold at best, and a fool's errand at worst. Especially since Grover's own construction experience was just a small shed in his backyard. But by God, that will not stop Grover. After all, he said he was a lieutenant colonel. Surely that qualified him to lead a construction campaign. And did George Washington give up at Valley Forge because it was cold? No! so Grover won't give up because some fucking naysayers told him to. But Grover knows better than to just get some lumber and nail it to the side of his house. No, first he needs to make plans, leading to some beautiful renders of the home in CAD, which really look like any other render in an old CAD program. But because his wife needs a more visual representation, he uses his mad Photoshop skills to make this beautiful artistic rendition. Very cool, Grover. After spending $400 on his permits, Grover also goes on to state something that I feel is both really funny and encapsulates the home owning experience was like before 2008. The other problem was financing. We did not have $80,000 for the addition, nor did we have $80,000 in equity for the house, nor could we find anyone to loan us an $80,000 for a reasonable mortgage rate. What we ended up doing was taking out a $27,000 home equity loan, nearly all of the equity from the housing boom, which was given to us for free, which would be enough to frame, roof, and seal the addition. Then we would get the house reappraised in hopes that our $27,000 would give us an extra $53,000 in equity so that we could finish. Early December, he got the loan, got the permits, and decided on a foundation guy. And on December 7th, 2005, ground would be broken. The digging begins. And because the land is, well, in a swamp, a Great Dismal Swamp too, with the water level just being 6 inches below the surface, even with Grover's sump pumps running, water continues to percolate up through the soft clay, turning the whole thing into what Grover calls a messy, muddy mess. To solve this damned issue, Grover listens to his concrete guy, who suggests laying down pea gravel, and Grover goes to buy $400 of it, just to later find out during an inspection that pea gravel is illegal to use and needs to be removed, and that Grover should hire an engineer. That engineer would arrive and tell Grover needs to dig the trenches 18 inches deeper, widen the trenches by 36 inches, and pour number 57 stone, and to also build up the wood molds the whole way around the concrete. The news almost brings Grover to tears. But he soldiers on. With construction continuing through Christmas, 2 weeks later, and $80,000 over budget, the foundation is ready. Grover also does the underhouse plumbing, which gets it approved on its first try. Everything's coming up Groverhaus! Or is it? Grover discovered that his 100-foot fiberglass tape measure that he used to square off the foundation stretched about 3/4 of an inch over 50 feet. And he had fucked up the foundation pins, making one wall of his house 1.5 inches shorter than the other. But Grover would just say poo-poo to that, and just shaved off the extra wood with a sawzall until it was perfect. From this, the great house would rise from the swamp to tower over his neighbors, while also towering over the old house, cause it looks like it's about like a foot taller than the old foundation. Nonetheless, the framing for the first floor is done. And what you doing there, Grover? Well, if you were confused as to what is going on here, let me explain. So, since this part of Virginia tends to get hurricanes, each wall needed to be built as a single big piece, not a bunch of smaller pieces put together. To get them up, they made the walls on the ground and used the push boards to lift them to the second floor, where they would be put into place. I agree, Grover. That sounds like a pain in the rear end. But Grover's now almost out of cash. Luckily, he still has enough to buy the windows. But first, to put the windows up, they need to wrap the house up so that they can have the weather-resistant barrier up. They did this during a week that Grover states was way too windy to have been doing a house wrap. Nonetheless, the windows will go up. The first floor goes fine, but how are they going to get these to the second floor? Well, you see, Grover states the 2 large windows on the second floor proved to be very difficult. He came up with a plan to build a 2-tier scaffold, where they would hoist the window from the ground to the first step, climb up, hoist it to the second, climb up again, and lift it into place. It works great on a picture window, which was the heavier one of the two, but the spring line, being 1 foot taller, was just so unwieldy and would just not go into place. He would try twice to get it in, failed, and on the second attempt, the lever action of the window damn near pushed my wife off the scaffold, which would have led directly to the window, falling on top of her, and Grover probably following. Their arms and legs, weak with strain and stress, tied it down in defeat, and pondered what to do, until Grover states he hears hammering. It was near dark, but the Mexican crew down the road was hard as work. Cool, Grover. Grover would then drive down and offered $50 for 2 guys to help. The foreman came with him, and the 2 of them lifted it into place in about 30 seconds with almost no effort. The foreman refused payment, but ended up finally accepting the $15 in cash Grover had on him. I suppose the question remains as to why he got 2 differently shaped windows for the second floor, but we love creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. But in the meantime, more pressing matters are at hand because the porch roof is leaking. So now Grover has to go and fix that. Although he states he half-asses it and just puts down some white roll roofing instead of a rubber roof with matching roof rolls. So after that side quest, Grover now goes to work on the electrical, spending $1,000 on cables, which took a month of evenings and weekends. Since nothing else occurs from that, I have to assume it went well. Next, Grover hires people to do siding. And since it's not him doing it, it goes smoothly. Groverhaus is starting to truly look like a Grover home. And it sure looks unique. Grover states, "Now all the neighbors think we're finished, lol." Now that all the siding is up, we get our first good look at the almost finished Groverhaus. I just need to ask, why is one of the garage doors just further out than the other? Why is the garage door just right next to the garage? Grover's plumbing then fails the city inspection. "They said I had too many things on a single half-inch pipe," Grover protested. "The chance of us doing more than 2 things simultaneously is low, and the impact of turning on 3 or 4 things even lower. What? The toilet will fill up slower?" And that he would much rather have 1 half-inch pipe through an insulated space than 3/4 inch freezing in his attic. But they wouldn't budge to Grover. Apparently, he is required to water his garden, wash his car, at the same time he's running his dishwasher, taking a shower, and flushing the toilet. So Grover would have to run the 3/4 inch pipe through the uninsulated attic. The plumbing inspector told him a trick to insulate it, and soldered a whole mess of copper tubing over top the hot water heater. My wife sweated all the fittings together, and we put it into place, only to discover that our efforts had cracked every single solder joint on the heater, which started weeping. You can't just resolder them, of course. It has to be taken apart and redone from scratch. Grover's wife would work until 2 a.m. 2 nights in a row so that Grover could take a hot shower in the morning before work, and finally got them done. The city would eventually pass them, but in the middle of October, Grover would go on an adventure to Lowe's. And to his surprise, garage doors were on sale for $180. Hot damn indeed, Grover! So he saves $260 per door and installs them. In the meantime, his wife installs the insulation. Now it's finally time for HVAC, where Grover states the first step is to get more money, which ended up being a lot easier than he expected, as the bank happily bumped up the value of his house based off of just his word alone, and he got a $50,000 home equity loan. But drat, Grover soon learns that HVAC retailers only sell to licensed HVAC people, which Grover is not. Undeterred by this sudden change, he scrounges around, and like what Walter White recommended in Breaking Bad, he gets the supplies from different places, finally getting everything he needs to install his ductwork. While it looks ugly, he does pass his inspection, so we can't really complain at it. At first, Grover is wanting to do all the drywall himself, but His wife wanted none of that. She convinced him to contract the board hanging and the plaster, which would cost them about $3,000 in labor. But since it would have taken forever to do and it would have been incredibly boring, Grover's content with this. Finally, now we make our way to December of 2006. Grover has just returned from Guam, and happy day! It's finally time to connect the house to the city sewer. So he calls a backhoe to dig a trench, which promptly collapsed 30 minutes after the backhoe left, burying the pipe in 24 inches of soppy mud. The backhoe would return the next day and redig it, but this failed inspection twice. But it would take a sacrifice of 2 sawzall blades, a hacksaw, 3 metal cutting blades, and his circular saw to get the cast iron pipe out. Grover would have to go all the way to buy an ankle grinder to cut it. But after doing all of those things, Grover passes. He can flush toilets! But then, of course, the next day it rained, the big trench he dug collapsed and flooded the pipe, and it all flooded, and the pipe floated back up and broke. That brings us to 3 days before Christmas, and Grover ended up having to go out in waist-deep sewer water and mud while trying to reconnect the pipes underwater. By Christmas, all of the cabinets in the kitchen are finally installed, and while having the goal of having Christmas dinner in the new house is a bit of a flop, they're still able to do most of the prep work in it. And finally, after all of that, we're up to date with Groverhaus. Every post Grover makes past this point will be occurring in real time. January 2007 begins, and Grover puts the stove and microwave into his kitchen. Unfortunately, Grover went by the instructions from his old stove. Instead of having a fucking industry standard, the stove had a freaking main support beam right where he put the receptacle. Contemplated moving the receptacle down, but then he just attacked the SOB with the new ankle grinder. Also around this time is where we would see the first photo of the insulated stairs. We also you have all these stockings hung up on a shitty little railing, and it's just making me wonder, why are they moving into this active construction site? They still have this fully functional house that's right next to where they're doing all the additions. We can see this more when they're putting all the tiles in the kitchen, and there's just food and stuff all over the place. Grover, why are you moving in? You still have a working kitchen. Also, why do you have 2 Roombas? The backhoe guy would arrive once more to fill in the septic tank and regrade the backyard. Apparently, he worked real late the night before and fell asleep in a Walmart parking lot. Due to his arrival, Grover and his wife had to clean the backyard so the backhoe man could regrade it. Except he was found sleeping in his truck, where he would sleep until 1 in the afternoon. Then he would leave for lunch, finally returning, caving in the septic tank, and then did a apparently very half-assed job regrading the yard before quitting for the night, complaining about mud. Grover would also spend $1,000 on a chandelier. Grover is once more out of money. His tax return was less than he expected, so now he's $3,000 short of the amount needed to finish the house. In the meantime, Grover and Grover's wife are just going to work on little odds and ends. Unrelated, but we get to see the ceiling at this point, and why are there so many vents? Why? But now Grover's getting the air conditioner all set up, and since he doesn't have an EPA license to do R22 gas, he has to get a contractor to do it. R22 gas in 2007 was in the process of being banned because it's an ozone depleting substance that contributes to global warming. Why are you using this, Grover? But the house is basically done at this point. Time to celebrate by breaking out the grill. Grover put the grill a little too close to the siding, and it melts. We do not get to see the melted siding, but we get to see the aftermath. Whoops-a-doodle, I suppose. But we get good news nonetheless. as Grover's old man offers to pay to finish the insulated stairs. Why just the stairs? We will never know. But first, Grover needs a new workbench for all of his projects. His current workbench, like his house, is too small. And after building his new workbench, Grover states that he needs a well-deserved beer. Finally get good news, because Grover passes the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical final inspections today. Woo! All that's left now is just the final building inspection. The mechanical guy also failed him for the drain line of the P-trap only having 2 inches of clearance instead of the required 3, but he passed him on the paper and said he would trust Grover to fix it. Grover promised he would, but the more he thinks about it, all that effort for a 1 inch larger trap seems pretty silly. He will finish the HVAC takeoffs like he said though, because that actually needs to be done. During this, Grover goes on a journey to get lumber, trim, and all the other stair parts. And as you can see, with it all sticking out of the back of his car, it was a very stressful drive for Grover and every car surrounding him. The stairs, now with a proper railing, are finally done. Still insulated, of course, and he also gets the carpet in. Grover would, of course, as is tradition, fail the final inspection, as one of the windows needed to be tempered glass instead of non-tempered glass. But besides this, the house is finally done! It may look fugly, it may be constantly cluttered, but it is finally finished. Almost 2 years from the start, and horrifically over budget, it is finished. Decorated for Christmas 2007, the final post in the saga would be made. I've been telling people that for a long time that the addition is almost done, but it's still missing the final vital component. And 3 days ago, it was completed! We were going to wait until February with the tax refund, but just couldn't wait, and are now the proud owners of a 65-inch 1080p DLP HD TV. Fuck yes, Grover! Enjoy your big TV in your bizarre upstairs living room. It may just have 2 paintings, 2 speakers, and a singular plant and look really fucking weird, but it's still the perfect place to enjoy a couple brewskis while watching the big game. But is this truly the end of Grover's house? If you were following along reading the thread, you would have noticed something. Every single post is people praising the glory of Grover. Wow, this thread is simply amazing! Grover, you son of a bitch, I wish I knew that. I would have come up and helped out and had a part in the great undertaking when I was up here. Somebody get this man gold bond. He earned it. I told you earlier that Grover ruled with an iron fist. Any and all dissent against his grand house will be quickly snuffed out. It is rather difficult to find posts and responses to his original blog as they came out, thanks to the scorched earth approach Grover had towards criticism. So all we really have from the original Groverhaus era is this take on Grover's house being the Bin Laden compound, and this thread making fun of it in Minecraft. Even with all of the anti-Grover threads being wiped out, thanks to the Streisand effect, a phenomenon where attempts to hide, remove, or censor information backfire by drawing more public attention to it, something being labeled a Groverhaus became shorthand lingo for shitty DIY. And how can we also forget the funny load-bearing drywall? The more Grover tried to erase the criticism, the more people talked about it. But what has Grover been up to for the past 20 years since he built his house? Well, his last post on Something Awful was on February 22nd, 2014, so we can't really be sure. However, the quest to find the house on flight simulators and Google Maps that it indeed still stands to this day. Luckily, of course, everyone has had the common courtesy to not post the address, so it's not doxing yet. But we also learned in 2021 that someone who lived near Groverhaus went to check it out, and Grover was there, on his porch, despite the fact that it was 35 degrees out. So I must assume he still exists in his house. Fully insulated thanks to the stairs, looking out of one of his two mismatched windows. Despite everything, all of the trials, all the tribulations, Grover succeeded. In mythology, hubris is usually punished. But Grover flew to the sun and was able to touch it before he safely returned home.